I've never been the kind of person who believes that roads remember people. Or that places can hold on to moments the way photographs do. At least, I didn't used to. This is something I've kept to myself for a long time, mostly because it's hard to explain without sounding dramatic. And nothing about what happened felt dramatic at the time. That's what bothers me the most. It was quiet. Ordinary. Forgettable. Which is exactly why I noticed when it wasn't anymore. Back then, my schedule was predictable to the point of being dull. I worked evenings, sometimes late into the night, at a place that blurred together after dark. The kind of job where time doesn't really pass so much as it leaks away slowly. Driving home was my reset. No people. No conversations. Just the road and the feeling that the day was finally over. There was one route I always took. Not because it was faster, but because it was consistent. A long, straight stretch of two-lane road that cut through trees and empty land before eventually reconnecting with the rest of the city. No gas stations. No houses. No traffic lights. Just pavement, darkness, and the occasional streetlight that seemed to exist more out of obligation than usefulness. I could drive it without thinking. And most nights, I did. The night this happened started like every other. I clocked out later than usual. I remember checking my phone before leaving the building, just after midnight. My co-workers were already gone. The parking lot was mostly empty, the kind of empty that makes your footsteps sound louder than they should. I got into my car and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. That part sticks with me now. At the time, I didn't question it. I just remember feeling reluctant, like I was leaving something unfinished behind. Or like I'd forgotten something important, even though I knew I hadn't. Eventually, I started the car and pulled out. The city lights thinned out quickly, replaced by darkness and the narrow beam of my headlights. I turned the radio on, then off again almost immediately. The noise felt wrong. Like it didn't belong. So I drove in silence. About 15 minutes in, I passed the last intersection before the long stretch of road I mentioned earlier. Once you passed it, there was no turning off until the other side. I remember thinking, very clearly, good. Almost home. That's when the road changed. Not physically. There were no detours or damage or anything like that. It was the same road I'd driven hundreds of times before. But the sense of movement felt off. It's hard to explain without sounding ridiculous. The best way I can describe it is that the drive felt longer than it should have been, but not in a noticeable way. Not enough to trigger alarm. Just enough to register somewhere in the back of my mind. The streetlights became more spaced out. Or maybe I just noticed the gaps between them more. I checked my speed. Normal. Checked the fuel gauge. Fine. Checked the clock. Only a few minutes had passed. I remember feeling relieved by that. Like I'd just confirmed that everything was still working the way it was supposed to. That relief didn't last. At some point, I realized I couldn't remember the last streetlight I'd passed. Or the one before that. The road ahead looked the same as it always did, but the sense of progress was gone. I wasn't tired. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't on my phone. I was paying attention. And yet, it felt like I'd been driving without actually going anywhere. I told myself I was overthinking it. That long drives do that sometimes. Especially at night. Still, I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. That's when I saw the car. It was ahead of me, just far enough that my headlights barely caught it. Old-looking. Boxy. Dark color. No brake lights. At first, I was relieved. Another car meant confirmation. Proof that the road was still real. That time was still moving. I closed the distance slowly, expecting it to speed up or turn off eventually. It didn't. It stayed at the same distance no matter what I did. If I accelerated, it did too. If I slowed down, it drifted forward just enough to stay ahead. That should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I focused on the details. No visible license plate. No visible driver. No reflection in the rearview mirror. I told myself the angle was wrong. Or the lighting. Then, without warning, the car's taillights turned on. Not brake lights. Just dim, steady red. It slowed down. So did I. We crawled forward like that for what felt like a long time. Too long for no reason. I remember checking the clock again. The numbers didn't make sense. It said I should have been home already. I blinked and looked again. Same time. No movement. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. I hadn't lost time exactly, it was more like time had stalled. The car ahead of me began to drift toward the shoulder. I expected it to stop. Instead, it kept going. Straight off the road. No brake lights. No swerve. No sound. It simply crossed the white line and disappeared into the darkness between the trees. I slammed on the brakes. My car skidded slightly before stopping. The sudden silence afterward was overwhelming. No engine noise ahead. No rustling. No impact sound. Nothing. I sat there, staring at the empty road where the car should have been. I waited for headlights to reappear. Or for movement in the trees. Or for anything at all. Nothing happened. After a long moment, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my body didn't know what else to do. I told myself I'd imagined it. That fatigue was messing with my perception. That maybe the car had turned off onto some hidden access road I'd never noticed before. I started driving again. Almost immediately, the sense of wrongness returned. The road felt narrower. The darkness thicker. And then I noticed something else. The streetlights were repeating. Same cracks in the pavement. Same bend in the road. Same broken reflector post on the right shoulder. I had seen this already. I knew I had. I slowed to a crawl, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I checked the clock again. The time hadn't changed. I pulled over. The engine idled as I sat there, staring straight ahead, afraid that if I looked around too much, I'd confirm something I wasn't ready to accept. Eventually, I turned the engine off. The silence that followed was immediate and complete. No wind. No insects. No distant highway noise. It felt like the world was holding its breath. That's when I heard the knock. One sharp tap against the passenger side window. I didn't move. Another knock followed, slower this time. Deliberate. I turned my head. There was someone standing there. Not close enough for the window to fog. Not far enough to feel safe. Just there. I couldn't make out their face. The darkness swallowed the details. But I could see their outline clearly. They leaned down slightly, as if trying to look inside. I shook my head without thinking. A silent refusal. The knocking stopped. Instead, they spoke. Not loudly. Not threatening. They said, "You passed already." My mouth went dry. I asked what they meant. They straightened up and took a step back, giving my headlights a clearer view of them. Their face was ordinary. Too ordinary. The kind of face you forget immediately after seeing it. They pointed down the road behind me. "You don't stop the first time," they said. "That's why it takes longer." I didn't understand. I didn't ask them to explain. I started the engine. The sound seemed to startle them. They stepped back again, hands raised slightly, like they hadn't expected resistance. I pulled back onto the road and drove. I didn't check my mirrors. I didn't slow down. I drove until the trees thinned out and the streetlights became normal again. Until the city lights returned. Until my phone buzzed with missed notifications like nothing had happened. When I finally got home, the clock said it was just after midnight. Earlier than when I'd left work. That part still doesn't make sense. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. In the days that followed, I noticed small changes. My car radio reset itself constantly. My dashboard clock wouldn't stay accurate. I started arriving places earlier than expected, or later, with no clear reason. Once, weeks later, I found dirt on my passenger side floor mat. Damp, dark soil that didn't match anything near my home or workplace. I threw it away. I stopped taking that road. I told myself it was over. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving somewhere unfamiliar, I feel it again. That sensation of movement without progress. And every once in a while, I'll see a car ahead of me. Old. Boxy. No brake lights. And I slow down. Every time. Because I don't want to find out what happens if I pass again.